This report I received today is a monumental document in more ways than one. But it is a very, very important piece of America's history, and it will shape America's future in ways that will make us a more honorable, more successful, and more ethical country. What this committee learned, I would like to review today with a little more detail than Dr. Faden said, because I think it must be engraved on our national memory. Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. Informed consent means your doctor tells you the risk of the treatment you are about to undergo. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities. When the government does wrong, we have a moral responsibility to admit it. The duty we owe to one another to tell the truth and to protect our fellow citizens from excesses like these is one we can never walk away from. Our government failed in that duty, and it offers an apology to the survivors and their families, and to all the American people who must be able to rely upon the United States to keep its word, to tell the truth, and to do the right thing. Make no mistake, as the committee report says, there are circumstances where compensation is appropriate as a matter of ethics and principle. I am committed to seeing to it that the United States of America lives up to its responsibility. Our greatness is measured not only in how we so frequently do right, but also how we act when we know we've done the wrong thing, how we confront our mistakes, make our apologies, and take action. That's why this morning I signed an executive order instructing every arm and agency of our government that conducts, supports, or regulates research involving human beings to review immediately their procedures in light of the recommendations of this report and the best knowledge and standards available today, and to report back to me by Christmas.
Hello, friends and enemies. Welcome to The Quiet Place. I am Jeremy Maddox, not Kevin Strange. We happen to share a website where I post my podcast. and that's it. And yet some people will still confuse the two of us for whatever reason, even though many people have podcast networks. Alright, anyway. Coming up on the show today is Stewart Swerdlow, who is most well known for the Montauk Project, which he was a part of for 13 years, very much involuntarily. We are going to go on a ride of epic proportions. We're going to talk about aliens. We're going to talk about time travel. We're going to talk about clones. We're going to talk about mind control. I'm Jesse Ventura, and I'm here to get the facts. So, people think the Maddox is crazy. I have been told no less than that through recent emails and Twitter posts and arguments. I have been compared to Elliot Rodger just because I used the word faggot in direct response to my detractors, because I know it gets under their skin and rattles them. For this reason, I am no better than a murderer, because I used an F word to these very, very sensitive, pussified people. So they think I'm crazy. They always have, and they always will. The question is, what am I to do about this? Should I just lay down and stop everything I'm doing just because people I don't even like anymore can't understand my message due to their own shortcomings? Or do I take that crazy factor, dial it up to maximum crazy? I've received every article of hate mail, every gentle and weaselly attempt to criticize me with gaslighting, and I've reviewed your hate mail. I find you all lacking in character. This is to my enemies. This is specifically to my enemies, and not the people who listen to the content of this show because they're my friend, associate, or because they like that I don't drink the Kool-Aid of some very insignificant people who have mistaken themselves to be super significant. I find you all lacking in character. You are incomplete people. Do some soul searching. But first you have to believe that we actually have souls. And we do. And I will no longer address you, my detractors, unless it is absolutely necessary. You hold me back. That's the God's honest truth. No more. From now on, I will target my monologues and dialogues at whoever else is in my audience that is actually enthusiastic about the content. Now, you can make good radio with detractors. Tonka Saw on YouTube has proved this with his internet blood sports. And don't believe anyone who tries to tell you that it was Andy Worski that started it. Andy Worski is running with Tonka Saw's creation right now. Internet blood sports. You get two people from violently different belief systems, and you get them on a YouTube channel or in a chat room or Google Hangouts or Skype, and you get them to argue it out, to duke it out verbally. This is internet blood sports, and Tonka Saw, who has been a previous guest on this show before, he perfected it. My point is, you can make good radio with detractors and scream at each other if they're willing to be guests. But what you can't do is make good radio with detractors who undermine you so that you can't even have a show, who flag you down like timid little creatures on social media so you can't even have a presence. As authors, you should know better, but then you people don't know much of anything. I'm sorry I ever met the large majority of you. You love censorship and suppression of rival ideas. And I'm sorry I ever bought most of your books. Whether I liked them or not is irrelevant. I'm sorry I ever supported the cause. And Rose, as patient as you were and as generous as you were, I'm also disappointed that you didn't try to hear me out better. Donaghy's alright. I think he's the only one. In other news, I did just watch the new Hellraiser Judgement. It was directed by Gary J. Tunnicliffe, who's a longtime makeup and effects artist on the Hellraiser series, dating back to at least Bloodline, but I think that he may have been there from the beginning. I'm not totally sure, but apparently he inherited the Hellraiser series as a director and writer, and Hellraiser Judgement. Where to begin? Well, I can now confirm that it is in fact possible for a movie to be both engaging as a story and still be deeply flawed in its presentation. There's this new character in the Hellraiser Judgement movie called the Auditor, and he actually begins the movie. So right off the bat, we're seeing a Cenobite, and people can get all technical and, with the gripes and say, oh, well, technically he's not a Cenobite. He's with Pinhead. He serves his darkness. So, yeah, I'm going to say that the Auditor is a Cenobite. I'm going to say he's Pinhead's second in command. He leads this homeless pedophile to the doorstep of this abandoned, rundown, ramshackle, dilapidated two-story house, and drugs him and straps him to a chair, and then coerces him to confess his gigantic sins against children. From there, we have this creepy guy with an open suit with his flab and his man titties hanging out. A gut hanging over his belt line, and he comes in with a lunchbox, and he pulls out these papers, and then he pulls out a vial of what he says are children's tears, and then he proceeds to pour the tears over these papers, which I guess are the confession articles of the captive. And then he proceeds to eat the paper covered in children's tears, and then violently throw it up at in a sink toilet type construction at the far corner of the room, and it's black vomit. I don't know. The problem is that Hellraiser movies, at least in the beginning, were more restrained. They were more elegant, and they held back the shocks and the scares and the grotesque. They saved them up, almost like there was foreplay by way of the puzzle box and strange things that would permeate the atmosphere around the puzzle box and the main character. And only towards the last half hour to 45 minutes would you actually see Pinhead in all his majesty and his Cenobites that accompany him, such as Butterball and Chatterer. I have some major problems with the Hellraiser Judgement movie. Least of which because it recycles things from earlier films. I'm thinking of Hellraiser Inferno, which also has a detective hot on the trail of a serial killer who is soon to strike again, and who is clearly abusing substances, this detective, and has a conflicted home life and is slowly going off the rails. These are all things we saw in Hellraiser Inferno, and I think that they're done even worse here. By the time Inferno was released straight to video, Hellraiser as a whole was already on the decline. And let's be honest, I don't think that this series has been, Barker approved since the third film. What was that? Hell on Earth, maybe? With the CD guy, the guy who shot CDs out of his head in the nightclub. I mean, that was a reduction to absurdity for the Cenobite concept. I just don't know about that. In any case, I would be interested to have Gary Tunnicliffe on the show to talk about why Doug Bradley is not in his usual uniform as Pinhead. Why did they get someone else to do it? And I would also like to know where he intends to take this troubled franchise that probably should have died a long time ago. Now look, here's the problem with Pinhead in the movie, is that I cannot buy him just sitting in a throne facing a wall in some basement of an abandoned house, in his spare time, just sitting at a throne facing a wall in a basement, in a mansion. I mean, he's supposed to be summoned from the puzzle box, right? So why is he hanging out in the basement of some 2-story house in the middle of nowhere? Makes no sense. It's a disrespect to the majesty of that character, and I don't know, it just seems shoddy, like shoddy workmanship. You would think the director would know better, but he was an effects artist, makeup artist, prior to this, so we'll see where he takes it. But also, something else that this film borrows heavily from, I feel, is the old movie Seven. And I can't go into the reasons why without spoiling the conclusion of the film, so I will not. Just to say that, yes, Hellraiser Judgment was engaging enough to keep my attention, but that doesn't mean that I liked where it took me. It didn't show me anything new, and I didn't feel that it was faithful. Maybe The Auditor should just get his own spin-off movie, because I feel there's a lot more value in that character at this point. Pinhead is as dead as Zed, baby. So did you guys hear about the Terry Goodkind book cover controversy? Yeah, that's a thing. So apparently Terry Goodkind has a new Sword of Truth novel coming out, because he's never been able to break away from that series. Speaking of decaying franchises, I always had a soft spot for Sword of Truth. It gets a bad rap because Goodkind is so forceful with the Ayn Rand objectivism that he crams into the books, where the main character, Richard Rahl, will go on these chapter-length rants, championing like a medieval form of objectivism and I guess libertarianism as well, in a fantasy world. He gets a bad rap for that, and he also gets a bad rap for all these sadomasochistic tendencies that he will most likely deny if confronted with in interviews. But this latest book, Shroud of Infinity, Mr. Goodkind was none too pleased with the cover, which I get the feeling he did not have as much input in as he would have liked, or else he would not have gone to the lengths that he would to encourage people, now encourage his own fans to berate the cover and the cover artist. Oh yeah. He actually ran a contest for the most creative insults to this cover for Shroud of Infinity. Here's what Mr. Goodkind had to say on Facebook about the cover. Shroud of Eternity is a great book with a very bad cover. Laughably bad. So, let's have some fun with it. Tell us what you think of the cover in my next post, and we'll pick 10 random entries to win a signed copy of the hardcover. Everyone's welcome to play. Just cast your vote and post a comment. Now the cover artist, whose name I am most likely going to butcher, but oh well, Bastien Lecouf de Harm. I don't know. I don't know why people put such a huge, emphasis on pronunciation, like it's going to make or break someone's intelligence. But here's the response from the cover artist. A friend sent me a message that I found in the morning when I woke up telling me that Terry Goodkind was using bad words to describe my artwork. DeHarm told IO9, I am a very confident person. I have had a long career, long enough for me to be able to take that. But this behavior is just not acceptable. Not only for me, but for all the artists that could be in the same situation. I can take that, it's no problem, he added, but if this happened to me 5 years ago, I think this would have destroyed me. Now, since then, Goodkind has ran his contest, and now he is hiding behind this excuse because nobody can handle bad PR anymore. Nobody can just ride out the storm and stand by their convictions. Now he is bending over backwards to try to put a different spin on it by saying, first of all, thank you everyone for all of your passion and taking the time to post. In no way do I feel the quality of the art is rendered poorly. For any misunderstanding, I apologize to the artist. The intention of our contest was to instead encourage my publisher to devote more thoughtful consideration with the artwork they wrap around my books, to more carefully value the characters and to be more respectful of my work and the readers. Gallows humor, to have a bit of fun and take a bite out of myself while we do it. And even more recently, he is saying that he dislikes the cover because it is sexist. Now, if he had gone with that kind of spin right off the bat, I think he would have been okay. But because, everybody's all about the social justice claptrap right now. It's a fad like flannel shirts and, whatever. He goes on to say, most recently, I write stories centered around strong female characters. I objected to the sexist cover my publisher commissioned for this book. By the way, it's just a woman with a sword that is sheathed, looking down on these two statues that appear to be bowed in supplication. I don't know if it's to her or to something in the, in front of them that we can't see on the cover. The dimensions of the book cover do seem odd. I don't know, something seems disproportionate, I don't know what. And there are people in the background and that I don't really know what purpose they're serving there. It's not a good cover, but I guess you could say it's a functional cover. It wouldn't deter me from buying a Sword of Truth book, being that I am already a Sword of Truth fan. Mr. Goodkind is under no obligation to like a cover engineered for his book that he wrote, if he feels it does not reflect the story contained within. I don't believe that we should adhere to a strict code of professionalism as creative people. On the other hand, he kind of chickened out with the whole, oh no, I like to write strong women, and I feel that the cover was not representative enough of the strong female characters that I write. Come on, man. You thought the cover was bullshit. Don't cuck out. We need you too bad, man. I don't guess the regular media, the regularly scheduled mainstream regurgitated media is going to talk much about what's been going on in South Africa, where these white farmers are going through basically their own Holocaust. Many people on my side have been following this development for a long time. The native African contingent, shall we say, the black portions of South Africa are very much throwing the white farmers to the wolves in that part of the world. And it's a very hostile sentiment that is being foisted on white men and women. Heidi Bernard, her home was invaded by these animals, and she so feared being raped that she chose to jump off out of a two-story window in order to avoid being raped. And now Heidi is fighting for her life in a hospital. Fractured head, massive internal bleeding, hemorrhaging, fractured cheekbone, fractured ribs. She had a blood transfusion and is undergoing surgery. I don't know how that surgery has gone. But I do know that she is not alone, that South African Parliament just pushed through a motion by Julius Malema, who is an unabashed, unashamed Marxist-Leninist. The motion will be to expropriate white farms without compensation. And the media is not covering this. White people are being genocided in South Africa. And I hope that Heidi Bernard pulls through. If anyone in South Africa can hear this and would like to come on the show to get their story out while there's still time, you have the floor. Please contact me at sickfix@gmail.com. Communism never works. It always ends with massive death by hunger. People resort to cannibalism under communism. And usually, as seen with Stalin, you won't even be able to escape the famine because there are roadblocks in place. Mao was worse than Stalin. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. Every time that the government seizes the means of production, particularly farmers, this is what happens. Massive famine. People resorting to cannibalism, reduced to animals. It has happened over and over, and people always say, "Oh, well, communism has never been tried right, the correct way. Let's try it with Stalin. Let's try it with Lenin. Let's try it with Trotsky. Let's try it with Stalin. Let's try it with Mao. Well, it didn't work. Let's try it with Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. Let's try it with Jaruzelski. Let's try it with Enver Hoxha. Let's try it with Muammar Gaddafi. Let's try it with Comrade Hillary, huh? Never works. It always leads to famine when they seize the means of production. You can think I'm crazy, but I swear to God, I've researched this. Every time people try communism and think that they are going to be made for life, they stand in bread lines. And eventually, it wears down the spirit to the point that people start bartering with each other out of desperation. That bartering is the spirit of capitalism trying to raise people up. And then the authorities get wind of this craftiness, this human ingenuity, and they smash it. Happens every time. If people try to trade, well, I would like... more rations for my voracious appetite. Can I trade you an old cigar or something? Can I trade you a possession in exchange? Maybe an old bottle of wine or something. That's capitalism, and they will ferret that out, and those people will be executed or fined or jailed. There is massive famine coming in South Africa because those people who are seizing this farmland, they will be unable to farm the land themselves. They're ignorant savages. If you live in South Africa, get out now. What are you doing there to begin with? Why do people live in these places that kill the human spirit? If you're an American, why would you ever go to South Africa? And if you're a white person living in South Africa, why are you still there? Are you going to stay there and fight? If you're going to stay there and fight, then fight. But so far, all I see are people having their land stolen, and people dying, people jumping out of the second story of their house to avoid a home invasion rape. That's all I see happening in South Africa. A very sad situation. I know the president stepped down in disgrace, but that's not enough. Jacob Zuma, if he's not incarcerated for letting all this happen through incompetence or through intentions, I don't know why. What a world. All right, I've blathered on long enough. I am very excited to get to my next guest, Stewart Swerdlow, here in just a moment. And stay tuned after the interview for some closing words, and I will also most likely do another edition of the Bipolar Book Report to let you know, fill you in on what I've been reading lately. But coming up next, Stewart Swerdlow. I have a feeling that this is going to be one to remember. The Montauk Project was a secret government project that was meant to carry on the activities that were brought to light under the Philadelphia experiment in the in the 40s, like as World War II was winding down, there were reports that a ship, the USS Eldridge, when this military base, these people were studying Einstein's unified field theory. They wanted to find out how to cloak a ship so that they could go into enemy territory without having been seen. Basically invisibility. Now, as they were attempting this, I guess to bend light or to displace, visibility of a ship, it just so happened to come unmoored, loosened from, time and space. The ship disappeared and reappeared in a harbor in Norfolk, Virginia, where it sat for a few moments and then quickly reappeared back in Philadelphia, where it was originally. And legend has it that men were fused to the ship. Faces and heads sticking out of metal and surfaces and the deck, the wheel. Men embedded in the ship. All sorts of abnormalities, anomalies. Men who weren't fused with the ship were said to be vastly different in personality. And there was even a tale told that a sailor got into some bar fight and disappeared in the middle of throwing a punch. Now that's the Philadelphia experiment. Later, at a base at Camp Hero at the edge of Long Island, they built the Montauk base. Montauk, that name comes from the Native American tribe that lived there. The Montauk Project, what the people there were wanting to do, they wanted to find out how to better bring a human being under control. And one of the ways they did this was to break their will was by exposing them to as much as their mind could handle and going just a step beyond that. They would bring them to this simmering point through loud music, intense vibrations, narcotics, LSD so advanced that, to hear some people tell it, the test subjects could communicate through each other's minds and experience the same trip simultaneously. I don't know about that, and there was even said to be a chair called the Montauk Chair, is what it's been referred to through legend, where one subject named Duncan Cameron, who is still alive today, would sit in this chair, and they would hook him up to all these cables and wires and such, and there was this screen in front of the chair. Now, because Duncan's mental capacities, his abilities were so far advanced in the realm of, I guess, ESP or well, I don't remember the name of it right now, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But ESP, we'll call it that. He was able to conjure visions through this screen, and then he could as detailed as he could envision these images on the screen. That's the screen would feed back whatever he was imagining. And it has even been said that he was able to bring something through one day. This Bigfoot type creature named Junior. Yes, I know, this all sounds crazy. To be quite frank, I don't believe it, but it's just incredible and epic enough that I'm okay to suspend my disbelief for an hour or two to speak with my next guest, Stewart Swerdlow. I mean, this is nothing new to me, suspension of disbelief. As a pro wrestling fan from the age of 6, I have no problem suspending my disbelief. And in high school, I remember I had this teacher named Dick Hale, and during math class, some days when all the advanced mathematics, which I never understood, to be honest, when they got to be too much, he would pull out these home videos, not home videos, but these instruction videos, specifically about paradigm shifts. And they showed how to change your mind, basically, about things in terms of the business world, in terms of your everyday life, changing habits, religion, politics, and even music preferences. And so, to give a better understanding to those who think that I'm crazy because of the things I talk about on this show, maybe it's better, maybe you could actually see where I'm going, why I do and say the things I do, if you understand those two key elements, that it's a combination of suspension of disbelief and the ability to shift my paradigm for however long I need to. Hopefully that will put to bed the whole Jeremy is crazy thing. So we can actually, get back to having an entertaining show, which none of my detractors seem to be able to pull off. There I go, giving them attention again. I'm sorry. All right. From here we go to Stewart Swerdlow directly, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I know I will. And stay tuned for the Bipolar Book Report and closing comments afterwards. Okay, we're going to take a ride on the esoteric side this week, courtesy of the man who stumbled upon this frequency today. Stewart Swerdlow has authored several books including Blue Blood, True Blood, Montauk, The Alien Connection, and 13 Cubed, Case Studies in Mind Control and Programming. He also claims to have first-hand experience with the research on mind control conducted at the Montauk facility at Camp Hero, Long Island. And Stewart, thanks for checking into The Quiet Place. My name is Jeremy Maddox, and I am looking forward for this trip through the multivaried dimensional spectrum that you will surely be taking me on here. But let's start. Go ahead and state your case.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate being invited on your show here. I guess the audience might be interested in my background or how I came to be involved in all of this.
Well, first of all, you were a miracle from the start, being born of a woman with no birth canal in a time when cesarean sections were not common practice. I mean, so already you came from a very spectacular beginning.
Well, that's right. And actually, it was not cesarean because what they did was they took my mother, to a hospital that was not yet open to the public. In fact, she told me there was not even heat on in the building, and it was cold. And she was just there alone with the doctor and the surgical team, who, according to her, performed the surgery that opened up a birth canal, and then they literally yanked me out. And she said I came out all black and blue, looked like I had been in a bar fight. And she said that this procedure was actually listed in medical records.
So there's documentation of this, is what you're saying?
Correct. I
Okay.
can't tell you where to look, but it's in medical books.
Okay. And you were also your great uncle was the first president of the Soviet Union, Yakov Sverdlow or Sverdlov.
Yeah, Yakov Sverdlov. Sverdlov is the actual pronunciation of my name, but of course in the United States they don't know how to say it. But Sverdlov is the name. And yes, Yakov was first president of the Soviet Union. His son, Andrei, who was my cousin, second remove, I guess, was the one who created the KGB. My uncle, Benjamin Sverdlov, who was Yakov's brother, was the one who started mind control and programming in the Soviet Union in the 1930s, which would actually make the Soviet Union the first major country that had mind control across their population. My grandmother, Maya Sverdlov, was actually a Soviet spy during World War II. And another, my grandfather, actually Mikhail Sverdlov, was sent to the United Kingdom to start the Communist Party there. And when he became successful, they then sent him to the United States to start the Communist Party in this country. So it's not the greatest of family backgrounds, but that's what it was.
That's a tough act to follow, isn't it, huh?
Well, and then, when I worked in Russia for a while, the Russians, the KGB actually told me that my uncle Yakov killed over 1 million Russians who were against him. And of course, Yakov also was the one who ordered the assassination of the Tsar and his family in the city of Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains, which was then renamed to Sverdlovsk in honor of my uncle. And Yakov was the first person to ever be buried in the walls of the Kremlin.
Was he a cellmate of Stalin at one point?
Yes, they were cellmates in Siberia. And there's actually there's books about that, and I actually read a diary of Stalin, who was the roommate of my uncle, my great uncle. And the funniest thing is that Stalin was complaining that my uncle was too neat and clean and kept cleaning up the cell. And I am also obsessive compulsive with cleanliness, so I guess I inherited that.
Have you experienced McCarthyism firsthand, knowing your background, and you don't try to hide it at all? I've seen it in several bios all over the internet. Have you experienced McCarthyism, though, as a result of that background?
Oh, absolutely. My goodness, I was imprisoned because of it. I was pulled into a men's room in a government building in New York one time, when then they locked the door behind them, and then they showed me aerial Soviet satellite photographs of Area 51 and asked me what this means. And so my answer was, you need to ask the question to the people who ordered the photographs, because I do not control satellites. And yes, I've been interrogated many times. I've been asked, what will happen if the United States is invaded? Who will I support? I have been stopped at airports and asked about my name and my family globally. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. And so, yes, I experienced this a lot.
What do you make of the, just because it's relevant to the topic at this moment? I mean, we're going to get to Montauk in a bit, but based on what you saw, what was revealed earlier with Putin demonstrating this nuclear simulation with these new cruise missiles that are hard to detect and have unorthodox patterns, what do you think that this is just a bear that's been poked at too often by unruly Democrats, or do you think that he's a legitimate threat that's about to become a danger.
Listen to me. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion is that, and it's not because of my background. My opinion is that the United States is more dangerous than Russia at the moment. And as far as the simulations are concerned, look, Kim Jong-un has done it. China has done it. United States has done it. All countries do this. It's like men in a locker room showing their muscles off. Who's bigger than the other one? It's just a big stupid game. And I remember back, I think it was in 2012, I was working in Moscow, and they took me to a residential area, very nice looking. And then we went into an elevator, went down to a lower level, and then they told me that we walked down 18 stories down a metal staircase to this huge underground bunker, which no one would ever know existed under Moscow. And there they showed me a simulation of a U.S. nuclear attack on Russia and the retaliation, even going so far as to make the room shake and the lights flash and so on. And I was kind of in a state of shock because I thought, what year is this? And you're still doing these games, these stupid things. So, my answer is this is what they play. This is a game. But my opinion is most of it is fear-mongering for the population. So people are afraid and will acquiesce to whatever the government tells them that we need to do or need to buy and so on.
Great answer. And nonpartisan too, which is to be commended.
Well, listen. My personal opinion is, and this is from experience, because quite honestly, most Americans don't go to very many places, especially where I go. And my experience is that the news overseas, especially in Russia, tends to be more accurate than in the Western world. Now, of course, it still has propaganda. Of course it does. But my opinion is that it's more to the point than in the Western news.
Russian Times or Russia Today?
Yeah, well, Russia Today, is a little bit opinionated, of course. I work a lot with REN-TV in Moscow, which I don't know if you've seen my shows I've done with the people there. I just recently did one last month. And they seem to be a little bit more open to different subjects and topics. I work with Anna Chapman. You may remember her. She was the Russian spy that was thrown out of the U.S. a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
And she has her own television network now, and I'm on that pretty often.
Mm-hmm. So, you were born in the, would you say, mid or late 60s?
Ha! I wish.
Oh.
I was born in 1956. Yes, I know I look much more beautiful, but that's because I take care of myself. It's very interesting, Jeremy, that I just recently came back from Ecuador, and a friend of mine has an alternative medical clinic there, which I go to because I don't trust Western medicine. Mm-hmm. And they did a lot of tests on me and so on. And, this year I'm going to be 62 years old.
What?
Yes. And so, but he said to me, the doctor, he says, your external body shows age of 48. And your internal organs show an age of 25.
Wow. I'm sure you have me beat.
Well, and he said that your internal organ body fat is only 9%. So I have the body of a 48-year-old and a 25-year-old, and I'm not giving it back. I'm keeping their bodies.
Right. You do look Spartan. If I do say in many pictures, definitely I can tell that you work out or exercise at least.
Well,
so.
I am also a personal trainer. I am a doctor. I have a degree in alternative medicine and deprogramming, And I work with Alternative Clinic in Ecuador and also the island of Nevis in the Caribbean. So I am very much up on the latest alternative medical techniques, supplements, etc. And that's mostly what I deal with in my clientele.
So, how did you come to be involved in the Montauk Project? You already had a disturbed childhood where, I mean, you claim that you have had these interactions as early as 5 and 6 that with some sort of beings, right?
Even before that,
Oh,
my
wow.
earliest memory of such a thing as 3 years old, which I wrote about in my Montauk Alien Connection book, I believe. So yes, and I write about this. It's because of my family background that the governments, both of the United States and at the time Soviet Union and so on, were very interested in my control or manipulation of what I did and my loyalties.
Hmm. I
And
mean,
my father actually was taken by U.S. Army to an underground location in El Paso, Texas, uh, during the early 1950s, also for special work.
so you became involved with the Montauk Project, not obviously not by choice, right?
Well, so on the surface, I would say no, but of course, from a spiritual level, I would say yes. I must have agreed to this before I came into this world. We all agree to everything that we do, even if we don't like it. And so that project was from 1970 to 1983, and it involved many different types of experiments and programs. Most people think of Montauk Project and they think only of time travel. But, I was also involved in genetic manipulation. I was involved in hyperspace activities, mind control programming, sexual ritual, weather manipulation, all kinds of different programs.
Were your parents aware of this?
Yes, I don't know if you've read that part of my work, but when I was a child, my mother would take me every week to Dr. Green, who we know is was Dr. Mengele, and I was tested and experimented on pretty much every week. I was also taken to a dentist every week who put implants in my teeth, which I have physical documentation on that. And so my mother was aware of those things, and my father was also aware of those things.
And what sort of trauma was visited upon you? Because I know you talk in this documentary, which we'll also get into a little bit later, the Montauk Chronicles. You discuss
Mhm.
how these people, they would rotate these staff members out or something, and they would drown you to bring you back, and they would shatter a person's mind. They would bring them to the point of hysteria, like a feverish trauma, and then shatter the mind so that they could reprogram to bring them firmly under their control.
That's correct, and that was a procedure that was developed during World War II by the Nazis, where you bring a person to extremes, which fractures the mind and creates compartments, which then can be programmed into alters, subalters, constructs, etc. And that they tested actually at Mauthausen concentration camp outside of Linz, Austria, where they would take captured Soviet soldiers in the wintertime, for example, send them outside naked, tie them to a pole where they would be frozen for a couple of days. Then they would bring them in and put them in severe heat. Then they would starve them for 3 days and overfeed them, keep them up, make them sleep, and so on. All kinds of extremes which would fracture the mind. And this was developed by Mengele and other Nazi programmers.
To what end? What is it do they want the perfect method of retaining someone's devotion? What are they looking for when they attempt these experiments?
Yes. When you are a control group of relatively few by comparison, and you need to control billions of people, then you realize that weapons and armies are not enough because you could be overwhelmed by the masses. So they needed to create conditions where the person felt that they were free, and when in fact they were the opposite. And I've always stated that the best slave is the one who doesn't know that he's a slave. And I look at various governments and various slogans, and quite honestly, I look at, United States, land of the free. Well, it's the most controlled, oppressed country on the earth, as far as my opinion is concerned. And so people think they're free, but they are not free, and look at the government they have now. It's like Twilight Zone. So, and here we are. And did you ever believe that in the 21st century, that Nazis would be marching in the streets of the United States? And so things are not what people think they are. And there is an agenda, which is well underway, for the complete control and domination of the global population.
Do you think that Antifa is an arm of this agenda?
Yes, and it's all controlled by the same group, because, it's the same puppet master that creates opposites that attack each other publicly to create a mindset for the population, which will then accept a solution to this controversy. Just like history repeating itself. We have, for example of United States history, the Civil War. We have those who supported slavery and those who were against slavery. But the controllers of both sides were the Rothschilds. They controlled both sides and created the war. The same we saw in World War II. We have the Nazis and we have the communists and the capitalists all fighting against each other, but controlled by the same people. So then they create an outcome, which they say is the solution to all of it, which people will accept because of their harsh experiences, and then they go along with whatever is imposed. So
yeah.
You create the problem, and then you create the solution.
I have noticed that people who are fed up with one aspect of the system or the other, they're becoming more radicalized one way or the other. And so like you said, we have people championing both fascism and communism again, and they're radicalized in response to the other side that is championing, and that is disturbing. Yeah, and then you have your free market capitalist fanatics who say, that screw the poor. Every man is, responsible for himself, even if he can't walk or if he's diseased. I mean, so you're right. We have this radicalized triangle, but with Montauk, I want to make the distinction, so there's as little overlap as possible between the Wilhelm Reich method, Project Monarch, and MK Ultra, and Manchurian Candidates, if that is a separate arm of all these different methods of mind control. Are those four things overlap? Do they relate, or are they separate methods of obtaining mind control?
Well, to answer your question, it's all of the above. Yes, they are separate protocols, and yet they are part of the same umbrella of mind control and programming. So, and there's a lot more than just those four. I mean, you mentioned maybe four main ones, but there's a lot more than that.
So the Wilhelm Reich method, that's illegal in the United States, but it was still used as stated in Blue Blood, True Blood, correct?
It's still illegal. Wilhelm Reich procedures are both programming and deprogramming techniques. And as you know, Wilhelm Reich was escaped from the Germans in World War II. He was given asylum first in Switzerland, then to the United States. And when his work became, I won't say public, but known to the public somewhat, then they imprisoned him. And in 1956, he mysteriously passed away at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. And then his work became illegal, not only in the United States, but in most of the Western world. And the reason it becomes illegal is because if they admit that mind control and programming exists, then the governments become responsible for the harm and for the illnesses that they've created on the population. And that would be a massive issue for the governments of Europe and North America.
Project Monarch, that's geared more towards a female mentality, wherein they're used as lures, seductresses to seduce those in power and bring them to their knees so that they will do what a higher power requires of them, right? This is a form of blackmail, and they break these women before they send them out to blackmail these politicians, correct?
Well, approximately 15% of Monarch program are male monarchs, not just female.
Really?
Oh, yes. And we're seeing this more in public when we are seeing these men come forward with saying that they've been sexually abused and so on. Yes, most are female, but there is a 15% approximately male counterpart to that. It's not only what you mentioned, it's also about espionage, it's about giving information, receiving information, and so on. There are many levels or layers of Monarch programming. For example, we have the top layer called the presidential model. Who is the male or female who is exquisitely groomed, very expensive clothing, jewelry, and so on. They spend time with the elite, and they give information, receive information, spy on them, etc. And yes, it's use of sexual information as well. However, that leads us to a sub-program of the sexual magic ritual, which is part or connected to both Monarch programming as well as other programming categories, where they perform a sexual ritual in order to invoke, for example, an astral entity or demonic entity in order to incorporate in the body, to have physical contact with the participants and so on. And it can get very complicated because these rituals can also be to enhance an event coming up. It can be to open a vortex and so on. It's quite complicated.
You have stated in one of your books that many key events that the media just feast on, maybe literally, like such as the John Benet Ramsey case. More recent examples would include Mandalay Bay, maybe Unite the Right. These incidents that become full-blown dramas, that threaten to collapse under their own weight. I mean, they're so big and so phenomenal in the public eye. These are part of a global ceremony, you say?
Yes. It's called a global ritual.
To what purpose? To whom? The 13 families?
Most, that's bottom line, yes. We must also remember that there are factions within factions. So it's not as simple as saying, black against white or them against us. It's many factions at this point, not only on the earth, but within the earth, outside of the earth, interdimensionally, and so on. So it's a very vast topic. Global rituals are designed to create a mindset, to open up or trigger alters within a certain programming category. So for example, one global ritual that comes to mind for me is the so-called meteor that struck Chelyabinsk in Russia a few years ago, which, by the way, was not a meteor. Meteors don't explode in the air, they hit the ground, and this one did not. But that was designed to trigger Green Star programming globally, which is about alien connections or interactions. That was part of that program. We also have the shootings in high schools and in public locations, not just in U.S., mostly in U.S., but elsewhere as well. These are designed to create a mindset to remove weapons from the population. So today, of course, every day from now on, you're going to see students crying on television, and you must take the guns away, and you love guns more than the children, and so on, when basically it is designed to disarm the population. So when the Illuminati and whoever supports them take over, no one can defend themselves. The first one to have this idea was Adolf Hitler. He said that his goal was to completely disarm the population so that his stormtroopers could take over with no resistance. And what happened then, we are seeing happening now. History is repeating itself.
How did you divide your time between home and the base when you were during those 13 years of hell at Montauk?
I had no control over that whatsoever. You know, it would happen in the middle of the night. It could happen in the daytime. There was no rhythm or a schedule. It would happen according to the desires of the controllers or the programmers at the time. And so how did it work? It was not easy. My home life was not a good one. You know, I had broken marriage. I had issues with my children. I had issues with work. I had physical issues. I was blind for 29 years. It was quite a mess. And so when the whole thing crashed on August 12, 1983, it was as if someone pulled a plug out and I was disconnected from the electricity. And it was like I was an alien in an alien world. I had no concept what to do, what to say, how to act. It was quite chaotic for me.
What were some of the experiments? I mean, you talk about hyperspace and how there were many there are pictures of the Montauk boys. I mean, and they're training, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And many of them were lost in these experiments.
I will tell you from what I was told by some of the surviving controllers of the project, that less than 1% survived. And of that 1%, most wound up in mental institutions or became drug addicts or alcoholics or not able to function in society. So I became somewhat of an anomaly, and I was basically an anomaly for the entire 13 years of the project because they could not wipe my memory. They tried very hard to erase my memory and to change my mind, but I remembered everything they did. Quite honestly, I wish I hadn't. I wish I was like the others that could not remember anything, and they went more easy on them. But for me, it was quite torturous because they punished me more for what I could remember and do.
And do you have any, pardon me if this is too personal, but do you have any physical scars as a result of that time?
Yes, of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have scars on my body. I have, for example, a few years ago, I had extensive dental work done, And the dentist, who was a holistic dentist, said to me, "Who did this to you? Because it's completely unnecessary work." And I had x-rays and so on. I've had x-rays taken where you can see the implants in my body. I recently had one in Ecuador that showed one in my right hip area. And yes, I have scars on my body and a lot of issues.
Tragic and unnecessary. That would be the seem to be the running thread with Montauk and the Philadelphia experiment, and even later programs. You know, MK Ultra and maybe Blue Beam, which doesn't get a lot of mention nowadays for some reason. But we talked about. No, go ahead.
I mentioned Blue Beam very often.
You even do lectures about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can get into that later. But we mentioned Wilhelm Reich a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
He was a result of Operation Paperclip, where they allow clemency to these offending parties in the Nazi regime in exchange for what they know, their research, their technology, right?
Yes, and so was Werner von Braun, who was the head of NASA. He was also part of that paperclip project to bring in Nazi war criminals secretly, both to United States, Canada, even the Soviet Union did it, Great Britain, so that they could use their knowledge and information and continue the projects, which is what they did.
And there was also a Camp Siegfried close to the Montauk base, or on its grounds. I'm not quite sure.
No, that was actually about an hour and a half west of Montauk Project. Oh. It was an area that was Camp Upton originally, and interestingly, I lived not far from there. They now have the Brookhaven National Labs based in this location, or not far from it. And they still, up until just 2 years ago, they had roads like Adolf Hitler Street, Goebbels Boulevard, and so on, even up until recently.
Unbelievable. I mean,
oh yes,
that's terribly bad taste. I mean, I guess it's okay if you're on 4chan, but the Nazi Bund is what they called their group, their little group on in Camp Siegfried, and you could only be on the premises if you were German. Yeah, as far as I know,
it was called Deutscher Bund.
Bund.
Which is it's like the Bundesreich in Germany. Is the government headquarters.
These people were there as early as 1920, proud Nazis, as the party was gaining popularity in Germany. I mean, they were already there in 1920 at Camp Siegfried, formerly Upton. So I mean, they had a pipeline, like a rat line, to ferret these Nazi war criminals in through, I guess, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind, that the head of the Ford Motor Company, Mr. Ford, had a picture of Adolf Hitler on his desk, and Adolf Hitler had a picture of Mr. Ford on his desk. And so there was on many levels on which the United States and Nazi Germany were working together. And this is why, during World War II, the German U-boats were seen coming towards Montauk area, and would submerge and head towards the coast. Nobody stopped them. And then they would see the boats leaving, and nobody stopped them either. So on some level, the U.S. and Germany were cooperating.
That is unusual, highly. Let's talk about the legendary Montauk Chair, wherein these Montauk boys, these subjects, would be strapped in, and they would be able to conjure images from their imagination onto this screen. Did you ever have a turn in this chair?
Well, let me clarify that bit of information. The Montauk boys were never on that chair. This was only by the lead psychic, who is Duncan Cameron, who was Duncan Cameron, who was the one on the chair and who was used. Now, there were many Montauk boys who were used as boosters for him, kind of like a battery pack to enhance his abilities. I was one of those as well. But for the most part, the Montauk boys were used at a much lower level than the chair.
And one of the most outrageous, extraordinary claims comes from an engineer, I guess, and like a prodigy in sound and music development, Preston Nichols, who authored the first Montauk books. He claims that the chair, Duncan Cameron conjured a creature, a Bigfoot type creature named, they called affectionately Junior, and
Right.
and it got loose on the base as sort of a plan B in case things got so out of hand with these experiments that they were going to effectively unseat these people from any kind of power and just wreck the base. So,
Well,
what did...
may I clarify that as well?
Please do, yes.
Yes?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, it wasn't exactly like that. After 13 years of such experiments, the people in the control booths became a bit lax. And there was a moment when Duncan was on the chair and they were finished with their experiments and he was just relaxing and falling asleep, and they in the control booth were doing other things. However, the equipment was still on. At the time, Duncan had a nightmare where he connected to an alternate reality where these energetic creatures existed, and he thus, through the equipment, created a link. This creature, this particular one, came through and manifested in the base and started creating havoc. And so because there was the link from the alternative reality into this one, there was no control switch from this reality to turn it off. So it was unstoppable. So the only solution was to destroy the equipment and thus disconnecting the unification between the two realities. And that's what they did.
And so Preston, according to his testimony, he was sent in to destroy the wave guides. It's all very technical talk, but he basically unplugged
that's basically what I told you, is to destroy the equipment.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you were very confused after the whole thing went down, and I'm sure you were lost, and they wanted it that way.
Quite honestly, in retrospect, no one expected that to happen. And so, like I said, it was like a feeling of being unplugged, completely. It's like you wake up one day and you're in another reality, and you can't imagine where you are, and that's how it felt. I had no point of reference to interact with the society. I did not know how to put gasoline in a vehicle. I did not know what songs or music was popular. I had no idea about what sports teams were doing what or anything else. It was like I mentioned to you, like being an alien in an alien world. And it was just a very, very horrible situation.
But did you have help from friends or family, anyone?
I would like to say that I did, but actually I did not, because nobody knew what to do with me. It was something, they thought I was just insane. And I guess you would say that I kind of was, because I was not focused in this reality. I was focused in many realities at once. And it caused a lot of problems in my family and my whole life.
When did you go to Israel and live in a kibbutz? Basically,
Kibbutz.
Kibbutz? What,
Yeah,
Kippets?
yeah,
The
yeah.
basically,
We have to give you lesson in foreign pronunciation.
definitely, and
Yeah.
many other things. It's basically the perfect communist society or community, right?
Hmm.
Was that
Yes.
after Montauk that you went there?
No, it was during.
Okay,
And
very
I was,
unpleasant, right?
yes, I was sent on a mission basically, uh, because at the time, there was the rumor of war between the Israelis and Egypt at that time and other places. And also, quite honestly, there was a time then, 1975, that was, the Israelis were reporting certain anomalous vehicles in the atmosphere and landing in the Negev desert. So I was sent to a communal farm on the border of the Gaza Strip, where I was to observe the activities in and around the area. I was to observe which foreigners were in this area as well, in the communal farm and surrounding, and and to observe what was going on in the skies. And when I was finished with that, I literally escaped from the communal farm because the communal or kibbutzim in Israel are communist, yes, and they're based on the old Soviet idea of communal property, communal living arrangements, and so on. In other words, your children are raised by the community, not by you personally. You eat communally, you live communally, and we every day had to salute the Soviet flag and so on. And so I escaped from there. At one point in the middle of the night, I went through Gaza. I had a Palestinian driver take me to the city of Ashkelon, and from there I went north. So that's a whole nother story, but it was basically a mission that I was sent on. I was sent on many missions by Montauk Project.
Preston Nichols said in one of his earlier books that he mentioned two diverging timelines. Now, I think we're getting more into your area, but he said that one timeline was God's timeline, the Judeo-Christian God, where we remain firmly in His grace, and the other is the one that we find ourselves in today, which he says is a direct result of Montauk meddling, if I understand right. Now, how is that possible? Isn't that what we call a paradox, or?
I have a different explanation.
Hmm.
Please understand that although I knew Preston for many years, he was in a different category than I was. He was in the technical end of things. I was in the experimental end of things. And so his perspective is quite different than my own. I will tell you that there are infinite timelines. All belong to God. There's not one that's from God and one that isn't. God creates all things infinitely. So yes, there are timelines where Montauk had influence, timelines where they didn't, and so on. And so you cannot change history. This is what we learned in Montauk. They sent people back to change historical events so that the current time moment would be different. And they found out they could not do this because there are infinite timelines where everything happens. Every possibility exists somewhere. So if you go back to change anything, you instantly switch to a different timeline where that event did occur along its time, and then you cannot come back to this one. So you can't change history. They tried that many times, you see. And so this is unfortunately, from what was learned then, they have developed CERN in Switzerland. CERN has nothing to do with the God particle that they're trying to discover, because it's an absolutely ridiculous statement. Every particle is a God particle. Anything that exists is a God particle. It's part of God, see? And so what they're trying to do is to merge or unify alternate timelines where the Illuminati and the reptilians have been successful and blend it into this one. kind of merging. Instead of changing a timeline, they're merging it. Different perspective. That's what we see happening now in CERN, and that's why we see so many anomalous activities around the world where strange creatures appear, strange vehicles appear. It's because of the vortices that are being artificially opened between timelines. And this is creating, let's say, an interest from the beings who live in these other timelines who are trying to stop what is happening here. So this goes back to what I said earlier about many factions, because it's not just the Illuminati, it's not just Fourth Reich, which is another group altogether. There's many factions, both interdimensionally, from alternate Earths, which are trying to stop what's going on here.
I love that answer, I have to say. I mean, it's almost too much to comprehend. So, not only are there alternate timelines, but alternate dimensions and alternate Earths, and even universes. From what I understand of what you've said, even universes are but just grains of sand on a like cosmic beach, basically, right?
Well, I like to use an analogy to help people understand. Let's say you have a radio, and we can say that radio is a creation, God-made. Mm-hmm. If I turn the dial just a little bit, I go to a different station. If I turn a little bit more, another station, and so on and so on. All the stations are different, and yet they're on the same radio. And so that's what it's like with alternate realities. Just by changing the frequency a slight bit, you go into a completely different time and space frequency or bandwidth, if that helps people to understand the nature of reality.
You know, when I was growing up, aliens were a source of just unparalleled joy to me. And so there's a sort of nostalgia in talking to you about this subject, even if I'm a bit flabbergasted to embrace it all. But in your book, you weave this rich tapestry of different beings, from giant butterflies to creatures from hyperspace that can only appear to us in the visages of symbols like the Egyptian Ankh. And I mean, it's just an incredible tapestry. But do you think that there's any chance that that this is a result of hallucinogens that were administered to you during your torture? And now I'm not suggesting.
Oh my goodness!
I'm not suggesting anything negative. But I have to ask, you know, and then I'll let you, you know.
Well, I can understand where that question would be, a legitimate question. But I can only tell you, yes, of course they used drugs, all kinds of things to open the mind pattern to input to programming. But when they did their serious experimental work, believe me, you had to be quite focused and in your mind in order to accomplish what needed to be accomplished. Otherwise, you would be destroyed. You understand? And so, yes, they used drugs and narcotics for sexual magic ritual and for programming purposes. But in the actual experiments, in the scientific process, absolutely not, because it would destroy the results and it could damage or endanger the people involved.
I appreciate you not taking that question personally. I just had to ask.
Jeremy, I have been asked so many things in these decades that I have heard all of it.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit more about CERN. They're even doing openly bohemian, like occult ceremonies right out there in the open, and I guess that they're packaging it in the press. The press statement that it's just a big party, you know, and we like to do it up weird and all this. But what are they really doing? I mean, with that kind of strange ritual with dancing and the hedonistic symbolism and everything. What are they doing at that Hadron Collider?
Well, you might also ask, why do they have a statue of the god Shiva, the god of destruction, in front of it?
Yes.
And I've been there. I have been to CERN and to Geneva and so on, and I can tell you that they are, the symbolism is that they are going to, it's the destruction of a current society, the way it's known, so that a new type of society can be replaced or put in its stead. That's the symbolism of it. Fortunately for humanity, at least several times in the last 3-4 years, they have been sabotaged by an outside source, and so they have not been able to accomplish in their time agenda what they have wished to accomplish. And I know that this will continue so that they are unable to accomplish their agenda. And that's basically what's going on. The Illuminati have identified 72 locations around the earth, which is discussed in the ancient Hebrew Kabbalah and in the ancient Egyptian religion of the 72 names of God, which you may have heard of. And these names of God are actually frequency vibrations for these 72 vortices around the world. CERN is one of them. It's located in Lake Lemans, which is also called Lake Geneva in English. And this is a vortex area. I can tell you that underneath Lake Geneva are many tunnels, both natural and artificial, that go to various parts of Europe and connect to the inner Earth and into other caverns within the upper crust of the Earth. And they are trying or attempting to open up the various locations so that the astral entities can exit into our physical reality and help the Illuminati for global control and dominion.
Who is holding these forces at bay? Is it this Kuiper Belt coalition that you mentioned in Blue Blood?
Yes.
Expand on that if you could.
Around our solar system is an area which is called the Kuiper Belt. It is kind of like a border area between our solar system and the deep space. So it's both energetic and physical. And in this location, in the last 10, 11 years, NASA has noticed the amassing or the appearance of objects. You may recall back in 2007, 2008, when I first started reporting on this, they would say almost every day, this object has appeared and that object has appeared and so on. And so it became quite suspicious. And so then they came up with the brilliant idea to say, well, Pluto, the planet Pluto, is actually a Kuiper Belt object. So it's just one of those, and therefore Pluto is no longer a planet. It's a Kuiper Belt object. And they kept changing the status of Pluto until this very day we don't know what it really is anymore. But they have admitted that Pluto has 5 satellites. Now, a planet or a mini planet or whatever they're calling it, the size of Pluto, cannot have the gravitational pull to sustain 5 objects around it. It's not powerful enough. Pluto only appeared in 1930. It is an artificial object, if you will. It is a monitoring device by these conglomeration of beings in the Kuiper Belt who are observing the Earth and our solar system. And they are not very happy with what they see going on this planet. So in effect, the Kuiper Belt has become a blockade of our solar system. And that is also why Montauk was created, so that they could create energetic pathways non-physically to supersede or bypass this blockade. And they have done so. And so the Kuiper Belt conglomeration, whatever you want to call it, these are beings, both physical and non-physical, most of whom come from galaxies and interdimensional spaces that we've never heard of before, and who feel that they are affected by what's going on the Earth. To them, the Earth is very much like what we consider Syria to be now. It's a problem area. It's a place of lack of control, of torture and killing and murder and so on. The Earth is considered to be a very, very dangerous location, and the one that must be contained. And that's what we are seeing happening from the Kuiper Belt. And this has created a big issue for the Illuminati, puts a crimp in their plans, if you will. And so they are, let's say, intensifying their plans on the Earth before the Kuiper Belt makes their move.
Man. Well, don't worry, Pluto. You're still a planet to me.
I always learned it was, so I don't know what they call it now anyway.
Some people even speculate that the moon, our moon, is artificial. I don't know.
It is artificial.
Really?
Oh, it's an artificial satellite. The moon is hollow, and the rocks taken from the moon are older than the Earth, and have a composition atomically that is not from even the solar system. So it's not from here.
I also believe that they've come to note that Venus may have been at one time hospitable to sentient life forms, but not so much anymore.
I wrote about this in Blue Blood, True Blood, and in my True World History books, those two. Venus was actually an ice comet that was driven in here eons ago to destroy the Lyrian colonies on Mars and Maldek, and then finally took up the second position from the sun and pushed the Earth into the third position. And the ice comet, because of the light of the sun, the ice evaporated and created the cloud conditions which still exist around Venus. And a long time ago, and I've written about this, the Soviet Union sent a spacecraft with a camera that could transmit pictures through the layers of clouds. This was in the 1980s. And only recently, 30 years later, Russian scientists re-examined the pictures, and they said, on the surface of Venus, they have seen a dinosaur, a giant spider,
what?
And a giant scorpion. And how they know that these were not rock formations is because they moved from one place to another in the photographs. Yes.
Are these photographs readily available?
Well, they were on the internet a few years ago. I don't know if they still are, but you can check.
That is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is, like I said, this is the kind of stuff I grew up on. So, I mean, even if I don't believe everything or haven't, come to that steady conclusion yet, I still love to explore it. And I mean, it's more fantastic than Star Wars.
Things like Star Wars and Star Trek, they're taken from reality.
You really think so?
I know so.
Yeah. How did you come into this possession of this vast wealth of secret knowledge? Was it during your time at Montauk? Was it later? Was it some sort of transmission? What?
Well, I'm not going to be like those airy-fairy people that tell you that Archangel Michael came to them and told them this story and that story, because that's also mind control and programming.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, much of my information comes from my 13 years at the Montauk Project. Plus, remember my family background. My family created KGB. And so I get a lot of information from them that is not in the history books, for example, and so on. And I still have information that I get from people around the world who are connected to such things, and much of my information comes from those sources.
Well, now, what do you think about what's going on in South Africa right now, where they're turning on farmers and they will eventually starve? This is what happens in all communist attempts. And how do you feel about the outcome of that situation?
I'm going to tell you. Years ago, I worked in South Africa. And when I worked there, the Afrikaners came to me. The Afrikaners meaning the white people of Dutch and German descent. Different than the white people of English descent, because they hate each other. And the Afrikaners came to me and said, you remind us of our prophet. And of course, I had no idea what they were talking about. But apparently 100 years ago, the Afrikaners had a prophet who said that when things become difficult for the white farmers and the white people in South Africa, the German army, the Fourth Reich, would appear from a hole in the Kalahari and would come up and defend them and remove the danger. And so the Afrikaners firmly believe that this will happen. And if you go to neighboring Namibia, which I did, Namibia, you would think, is that somebody picked up Bavaria in the 1930s and plopped it down in Southwest Africa. There are beer halls, lederhosen. Yes, they're just waiting
for their putsch, right?
What's that?
They're waiting for their putsch, their beer hall putsch.
Yes, and they firmly, not even believe, they know it will happen.
Oh boy. What is the Kalahari?
The desert of the Kalahari?
Okay.
Is that what you mean? Yes, it's a desert in Africa.
That the Fourth Reich is going to emerge from.
Yes, you must understand that there are inner earth tunnels and cavern systems that connect globally.
Hollow Earth?
Well, yes, but this is also in the upper crust as well. And this connects from South Africa and even South America to Antarctica. And from 1938 to 1944, the Third Reich created what they called the paradise for the Führer in an area that the Germans called Neuschwabenland. And Neuschwabenland was built underneath. You find New Berlin, New München, all German cities rebuilt there. Admiral Byrd went there in 1947 and talks about seeing the Germans in the opening in the South Pole, and discusses it even on an old news program from the early 1950s that was filmed in New York. I think it's still on the internet. And he said that this would be a danger in the future. And he said this, 60 some odd years ago. So there's a lot going on in the earth and under the earth that people don't realize.
I recall a gentleman named Otto Rahn. Ron? How do I pronounce that, since I need work on it? Run?
Otto Roden.
So you're familiar with him already. He was sort of Hitler's esoteric agent. He was his Indiana Jones, where he would go on these quests for these artifacts that had mystical significance, including the Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny, and I believe that he also stopped over near Antarctica searching for some sort of opening that would reveal some sort of base underneath.
The Germans discovered this long time ago. The caverns underneath the ice, and they have built gigantic complexes there. And towards the end of the war, from Bremerhaven in northern Germany, they collected men and women from Germany, Austria, Ukraine, Poland, all the who were blonde hair, blue eyed. And there's videos of this, or I should say old film, of them going to the ships and sailing to Antarctica and never returned. And in 1946 to 1947, there was something called Project High Jump, where the United States and Canada and Britain sent fleets of Navy and the Air Force to Antarctica. Why? War was over by 1946, and 55 U.S. Military were killed by weapons and vehicles they could not fight against. And they returned to the United States empty-handed.
Wow.
Yeah, this is history. You can look it up.
I absolutely will. And I have glanced over Admiral Byrd's journal, and also read some other supplemental Hollowworth's things, such as the Smoky God, other testimonies, of these people who come across these. They undergo these fantastic adventures into the inner Earth, and I guess based on what you've told me, if there are limitless realities and dimensions and all this, then there must be one where the Earth really is flat, or maybe you think that's this one. Something tells me no, but
listen. The only thing that's flat is the heads of the people who believe.
Go ahead.
The Earth is round. The moon is round. All objects in space, natural objects or vehicles, they're round because that's how they move through space. And so, no, it is not flat anywhere.
That's a good way to determine, just how far on the spectrum of esoterica, someone is. What do you believe, flat earthers? Because that's what we call a total violation of Occam's razor, right?
Well, it's basically mind control and programming.
Really?
What it's, yeah. To believe, bizarro things that are not true. For example, another one. Yes, your audience will be maybe angry at me, if not already. But global warming is also fake. There's no such thing. Look, it's snowing in Spain. It's snowing in Africa. This is not global warming.
Yeah, we're seeing harsh winters all over. I mean, and I mean, look at prehistory. The Earth was always heating up and cooling dramatically. I mean,
yes, but we are now in the beginning of a new ice age.
You really think so? I mean,
I know so.
So it's the complete opposite of global warming, then, right?
Yes, whatever the news tells you, it's the opposite.
I believe that. We're winding down now. I hope I'm not keeping you too long. I'll try to wrap up soon if you have other engagements.
No, I'm wearing my astronaut diaper, so I have no worries about that or anything like this.
Okay. Well, we're almost through here, but let's get to the uncomfortable subject, and I think but we will be, we will get through it. The documentary Montauk Chronicles with Chris Garetano, a devotee of all things Montauk, decides to do a documentary, and he recruits all the usual suspects from that were involved from in exposing it. Al Bielek, Preston Nichols. I didn't see Peter Moon in there, but whatever. And you.
No, they are enemies.
They are?
Yes.
Oh. Are you?
Listen, the person you mentioned, who I will not say, used to be someone I thought was a friend.
Oh.
But in 2016, he came here with a film crew for History Channel and betrayed me and stabbed me in the back publicly. And for this, ultimately he will pay.
So you regret getting involved with Chris now?
No. Well, yes. What he did, the Montauk Chronicles movie, it was a good thing. But of course, the very end, Interestingly, he stuck in a person who's a complete fraud at the end of the film.
James Bruce?
I don't know the name of the person, and I'm not going to say that person's name.
Gotcha.
But the person was a complete fraud, and I think he was purposely put in there to sabotage all the legitimate information that came previously. That's what my opinion is.
There's no way that it could have been well intentioned to dramatically lend. Okay.
He knew better than that.
Okay.
And as far as a documentary from History Channel, they lied to me. They set up a secret location in another part of my home without telling me, and filmed things and asked questions that had nothing to do with Montauk. And they basically betrayed me. And when I realized their betrayal and deceit, I threw them out.
Now, I promise this will be over soon, but the two individuals that went with Chris Garetano to that house, one was an author of a book with a very BuzzFeed-like cover. It just screamed, hipster to me.
He's a what they call skeptic. What do you call those people that they purposely undermine the truth?
Disinfo?
Yes, but there's another word for them. Sometimes my English words, I forget them.
Doubting
anyway.
Thomas?
No, there's another word about that they're basically disinformation people who purposely look to undermine the truth so that people don't believe the truth anymore. There's a word it'll come to me eventually. Debunker. He's a debunker.
Ah, yes.
Yes. And the other one, a CIA psychiatrist.
Thank you. I was going to bring that up. Yes.
It's like, really? It's that's like the fox telling the chickens how to defend the hen house.
Stewart is making extraordinary claims. You have interviewed a number of people who have extraordinary claims. People who've seen UFOs, for example. I understand a certain baseline level of nervousness. You're about to say something and people are going to think you're crazy. And of course that would make you nervous and reticent. Does Stewart seem like that to you? Does he seem different?
He seems different. He's too sure of himself, comparing him to the other people I've interviewed. They sort of struggle to process this, integrate it, understand it. He claims to have this complete overarching view of how everything works, from the Illuminati to aliens from other star systems, and
I don't know what they were thinking with that, because what's the saying? Once you're in the CIA, you're in for life.
Seriously, but beyond all that, Jeremy, they never told me those people were coming.
Really?
They surprised with them. Yeah, they lied to me about everything. They were setting me up to make me look bad. That's what they did.
Well, they didn't come in. I don't know about Chris, but you know him better than I do. I got the impression that he was caught in the middle, but
No,
I will defer to you on that.
No, it was a complete setup. They knew what they were doing on purpose, and I will not forgive them for the rest of my life.
Yeah, they didn't exactly come in good faith, especially the Volk and the CIA agent. And I was going to ask you if you found that odd.
Let me tell you, when the crew first arrived, I said, "Where's Christopher?" He said, "Oh, he's home doing laundry. He was busy today."
What?
I said, "Yeah." I said, "What?" And then all of a sudden he showed up with these, I don't know what words to call them, because it's not nice words I can call them. But they showed up like, "Who are these people?" "Oh, they're just going to interview you." "Well, you never told me beforehand."
Oh,
it was a complete setup.
Was anything edited out of the exchange?
Of course, the whole thing of how they secretly set up a room watching me was edited out. After I showed them the area, they said, "Oh, no, we're not going to use this place at all." And they did. They lied to me in my own home. In my own home, they came in and did that to me.
Yeah.
They're the most evil people on the face of the earth. And I don't mind saying that publicly.
You have met some pretty evil people, so you know.
Let me tell you something. I don't have to wish them any harm, because what they are, they will create their own harm against themselves.
I know what you mean. Well, I find it interesting in your defense that they complain at first that you seem too confident and self-assured in whatever you state with these quote-unquote extraordinary claims. But they also note that you get nervous at one point. Well, so which is it? You just can't win with these people. Is it when...
I wasn't nervous. I was getting suspicious of what they were doing.
Right, and I felt that going into it as well. I was like, oh, what are they going to do to this guy, you know? Because I could tell that it was not in good faith. But, I mean...
Let me tell you something. When that undermined demonic entity, Mr. Volk, came down to interview me as a surprise, I didn't know he was even in my home, he looked at me and he says, oh, this is going to be fun. And I thought, what does that mean? You know, and then he starts interrogating me about things that had nothing to do with what the topic was about.
Mm-hmm. He was trying to impugn your character.
Yes, exactly correct.
Now, you're also able to tell people when they're programmed.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's programmed.
Everyone's programmed.
Everyone on this planet.
So I'm programmed.
Of course you
We're
are.
all programmed. How would we get out of it? What's the deprogramming technique?
You want me to repeat volumes of books to tell you how to deprogram. It involves a lot of things.
It's interesting because you have such a wide base of knowledge in terms of how people are programmed, how to remove that programming, the relationship of various alien races to all this, and yet we can't get evidence, for instance, of Montauk and the project itself.
The reason you can't get physical proof is because if the government admits this, they have to take responsibility on all the people they've damaged and hurt. So they're not going to admit any of this ever.
In past government conspiracies, it just seems like some sort of denial, some sort of effort would come to stop you now when you're at a level before everybody believes you, you know?
They've put me in prison. They've threatened me. They harass me on a weekly basis. Yes, I'm harassed all the time.
Let's talk about the prison thing then. When did they put you in prison?
They put me in prison in 1992 to 93, maybe.
For?
One count of bank fraud.
You pled guilty in the case, right?
I was forced to, because they threatened my family.
There's a long-running nonprofit called the Cult Education Institute, run by Rick Ross. And they have a public forum where people who have concerns about groups can post there. Possibly.
I'm sorry.
Here we go.
I don't think I like the line of questioning.
Either, and that man, I'll tell you, I know exactly who it is who has written those things, and they lie, and they have had problems with us, and they've attacked us, and I don't want him addressing it. I even myself wrote to Rick Ross to say, please take this down.
I think he's a fraud.
I don't want to go there. This was supposed to be about Montauk, not to interrogate and try and make this into something it's not.
What is your agenda? What is your agenda? Because your line of questioning is quite disturbing.
My agenda is to ask the questions that I think any reporter would ask.
This is my home.
No, I understand. I respect that. I really do, and I appreciate you letting me in. My idea here is that you guys really are claiming to be at the vanguard of spiritual thinking in the world.
I'm not claiming to be a vanguard of anything.
You understand.
I tell what I know, and you can accept it or reject it. I'm not a vanguard. I'm not asking for followers. I'm not creating anything.
Look, I appreciate so much you guys letting me in and have the chance to talk. I really do.
I don't know what your agenda is, but you're very hostile. I'm very disappointed in you.
I'm upset with Christopher for doing this.
And Christopher too. And you could all just leave now. I'm done.
They're done. It's just said. You're all.
I thought, no, I didn't actually. You noticed me? No, I knew he was coming, but wait a second.
And I find it also interesting, just as a side note, his last name is Volk, which is German for what, populace or?
Folk is people.
Yes.
Folk.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Did you make that connection?
Well, I would have spelled his name with a different letter in the front.
Wow. We have been on a journey. How did you get into archetype reading? I understand that's a service you offer on
Yes.
what is it?
Well, of course,
Expansions.com?
Yes, expansions.com. That's our website. We also have a Facebook pages, a fan page, and personal pages. But the work that I did at Montauk to read hyperspace language, to interpret it for the people there, and to understand the colors, and to create archetype sentences for creation of whatever they wanted to create, I have taken that information and I have given it to the public so that you can use it to change your own life and to create what you want to manifest.
Would it be inappropriate to ask for a demonstration? Or
How so?
Well, what exactly is an archetype reading, and how does one go about it? What do they? What?
Well, for example, when I do a reading, I don't call it an archetype reading. I call it more energetic. I take the person's birth name, their birth date. I look at the frequencies, and I look at the energies and determine what you're here for on this earth. What are your internal organs like? What are the mind patterns? How do you correct it, and so on? It takes a good hour and a half or more to go through everybody.
We've been going at this almost an hour and a half, and you probably haven't been actively pursuing it, but do you get any sort of feeling from yours truly?
Do I have a permission to tell you?
I think I would be interested to know, good or bad, yes.
Well, it's not good or bad. It just is what it is. As far as physical issues, which I think you should take a look at, there is a problem with your thyroid area, which is very low functioning. Your T3, T4, and THS hormones are low capacity. There is also issues hormonally, which could be easily corrected. And there's also issues in the digestive system, which again could be easily corrected.
Okay.
I don't want to go too personal on the air with you, but if you wish, I can let you know how to fix those privately.
Okay. Anything psychologically that I should work on?
Well, yes, absolutely. Quite honestly, your frequency shows that you're just a little bit stubborn at times and a bit unstable, and you do like to have a lot of choices at the end of things. But you do have some programming activations that need to be looked at. Very often you don't finish what you start. But interestingly, and I looked this even before we went on the air, you tend to, let's say, you either eliminate things or expand them exponentially. It's kind of extreme. So you can go to extreme at times.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So this is what everyone feels when they go to you, that they're like, man, he nailed it, right? I mean, more often than not, right?
I hear that a lot, yes. But I am not trying to be a parlor trick. I just look at the energy and I say what I see, and they can accept or reject.
That is truly fascinating. I thank you for that preview, and you can consult with Stewart on his website, and his wife as well, Janet, on expansions.com, and he offers a wide variety of services, I understand. And you should also seek out his, shall we call them, alternative history books. Alternative to the main paradigm in any case.
And also, I also do alternative health, as you know, not just history. So we have a very wide range of topics and subjects that we look at.
I wanted to leave on this note, Stewart. By the way, before I get to that, are you writing anything at the moment? Will you still be publishing books?
Oh, absolutely. We're just completing now a gigantic alternative medical book, which lists just about every illness and condition known to mankind, the mind patterns behind it, and how to correct it.
All right. I wanted to leave you on this note. I don't know how you'll take this, but here goes anyway. This may seem absurd, but ever since I was a teenager and on through to adulthood, I've always had this elaborate vision. Probably, I mean, it's fantasy, but I know it's fantasy. I have not had the experiences you have had, for sure. But I have this fantasy of a giant reset button that people like those that operated in the Montauk facility will push to reset civilization, to reset history. And I revisit this fantasy often because it intrigues me and encourages me to dive into history as it happened more. I like to envision that it's happening parallel to me at this moment. And it took a lot of years for me to perfect this fantasy, shall we call it. And if I were a better writer, I would incorporate it into my writing. But as you said, I don't finish a lot of things I start, including novels. But I just wanted to tell someone who might understand this that I carry this vision with me everywhere I go every day. And I think you're the first person that I've ever told it to to completion. I act out this drama in my head year after year, and it never gets old. Is that absurd? I mean...
Nothing is absurd. Everything has legitimacy, and I would encourage you to look at this more closely and see what the reflection is for your own self.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, it's legitimate.
Excellent. Stewart, I would love for you to come back in the future, and we can begin to talk about some of the things that I didn't even get to in my notes, because you're such a learned individual and well-traveled, and I appreciate your patience with my pronunciation problems and everything.
That's okay. You're from the South. It's forgivable.
I appreciate this so much. This is a gift, and I hope to talk to you again in the future. I will let you know when it's posted.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I have a son named Jeremy, and I have a special affinity for that name. And I appreciate your interest in my work, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Excellent. And I'm going to go out, I'm going to give you the 14 words. Thank you for checking into The Quiet Place and sharing your story with me. Thanks again, Stewart.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and I am back. What an interview. I feel re-energized after that, seriously. Yeah, Stewart hit dead on with that cold reading of me, but maybe not with everything, but particularly the psychological profile. I was impressed. I cannot bring myself to accept that he is a part of a galactic council that watches over Earth. I wish I could. I do believe that parts of Montauk Project are true, particularly the mind control portions. But I cannot bring myself to accept the full spectrum of what I'm being asked to believe. That's my final conclusion for the moment. I mean, obviously, but regardless, I thank Stewart for coming on. It took some convincing. I think he was worried that there was going to be another showdown, much like on the Dark Files program on the History Channel. And he was worried that I was going to try to impugn his character or quote-unquote debunk him. No, I let him talk, and I'm glad I did. As I said in the opening segment, two of the main keys to understanding this program and me as a personality are suspension of disbelief and the ability to shift your paradigm shift and suspension of disbelief. So if you don't have those things, then you may have the wrong program for you. We may need to find a different show for you. But before we wrap things up here, I will leave you with my bipolar book report for the week. And that book is Mao's Great Famine by Frank Decoter. This is a very sobering book about an untold millions of people, not just suffering, not just starving, but in a literal hell on earth. It began with the Great Leap Forward, when Mao, talked about China being in a state of perpetual revolution so that it may always continue benefiting the people. He would uproot, his cadres were used to appoint his new policies, his communist policies, and these cadres would uproot people from the city and send them to farm, and then they would uproot those people from those farms and send them to the city to work producing steel. Women and children were expected to participate as much as the men, or even more. Women contributed hair as fertilizer. They built kilns in the rice fields to produce steel that served no purpose, that was unexportable by any traditional measurement. I mean, people looked upon Mao, I'm sure at the time, as the luckiest man in international politics. I mean, to be such a stumbling bumpkin that I remember watching some CIA documentary where he says that where someone is quoting him as stating that George Washington had electricity. Mao actually believed that George Washington knew how to change a light bulb or something. And Mao made it his goal to eliminate anyone that he called a rightist, and while championing egalitarian values, liberal values, he was all about advancing social justice, literal words that have been used throughout history, by the way. I believe they were first uttered by Lenin. Sound familiar? Social justice. Anyway, so Mao's policies were all out of whack, and everyone was scared to death to even offer any kind of advice that would go against his holy decree. Okay, I mean, it got so bad during the famine that families would dig up bodies of the dead. They would eat the putrefying flesh of the dead. That's how bad it got, according to this book now. As the government seized the means of production, they would tear down shacks on farmland in order to use the wood for state purposes. Families were forced to sleep in outhouses or share very small housing with multiple families of 5 and 6. You really get a picture from this book of just never having any relief from the desperation and the famine and the edema and the lice and the physical exhaustion, sometimes the rape, the being tied up and marched through the streets naked. These were terrible times, and for many years it was a mistake that to believe that Mao and his policies, between the corporal punishment and the famine and everything else that led to immense death, that it only amounted really to 34 million, when in fact a closer number would be 70 million. This number tops the body count of both Stalin and Hitler, which is why I say that Mao is in fact worse than Hitler. But most communists are. And that's not a defense of Hitler, it's just a fact. As in their race to join the international community and prove that China was far more advanced than all the other countries, they would force workers to innovate new wagons of iron that were so heavy that the bulls couldn't even pull them, okay? And this led to a slowdown in production, or it ceased altogether in several villages. And yet, any farmer who was seen on the roads peddling an old-fashioned cart, they would be stripped naked, tied up, and marched through the streets. Women were hung up by their hair and suspended. Women were, of course, raped by cadres that were unruly, but then again, all of them were unruly. If these workers at the People's Temple did not eat enough at mealtime, if they didn't absolutely gorge themselves on the surplus food that was available there, then they were punished. They were flogged and tied up and marched through the streets and humiliated. And then other times when there was a deficit of food shortage, they were chastised for eating too much. So you really get a picture that Mao is this childlike character that just could not be satisfied. And in fact, this comes to bear even later when he declares, upon seeing how ingenious the workers are in hiding their grain storages from the prying eyes of cadres in order to hoard it for themselves, Mao actually has a change of heart and champions their ingenuity at hiding the grain from the cadres and the inspection teams, and declares that he is opponent of liberalism and egalitarianism, and he champions rightist and conservative ingenuity. Of course, this doesn't last long, because people who were openly vocal of him, even in this period, would find themselves penalized horribly, killed, or displaced. Let's see, what else? The Party of Labor, when they would come to these villages to inspect that human rights were being honored, they would often turn a blind eye out of fear of Mao. They would turn a blind eye to most abuses. Villagers and workers became so discouraged and despondent about their treatment, of having to work without breaks for upwards of anywhere from 9 to 12 hours, and sometimes even through the night. And when 10 hours a day was considered short, I think, a short day. And then they would have to go home and study for 2 hours. But mental health in one village in particular, Wuhan, was so pronounced that over 2,000 people in need of treatment went without because there were only 30 beds available to the mentally ill. One of Mao's more inhumane policies was punish one to deter 100, and as a result, people died by the thousands anyway, and millions anyway. As I said, they ate putrefied flesh, And Mao became really concerned about his legacy towards the end, so much that after the failure of the Great Leap Forward, he began another, shall we say, directive or operation that he called the Proletariat Cultural Revolution. And he lashed out at one of his aides to say that to bemoan suddenly the untold legions of dead Chinese under his watch. And he said, "What will history say of us? What will history say of me?" And he said to his aide, "What have you done to resist this? People will talk about this in the history books, even the cannibalism." He acknowledged the cannibalism that people were resorting to. They were no better than animals, all because of him and his total incompetence at his post. And for these people who have been turned insane due to their hatred of Trump, they will champion Mao because of his eagerness to incorporate women into the workforce. But don't you understand, it was slave labor. It was slave labor dressed up with prettier language, and it indoctrinated these women to believe that this was all for their benefit. The cannibalism, the rape, the public humiliation was all for their benefit. But it's interesting that reading this book, Mao's Great Famine, that there's an anecdote of Mao and Kissinger when they're speaking in private, and Mao offers to send several million women over to kick him over to Russia, basically, and said, they cause us nothing but trouble here. They'll create disasters for you, but it would do us a great boon if you would take several women off our hands. And Kissinger's rebuttal was, "You're actually improving your offer, Chairman." And they had a laugh about this before asking it to be stricken from the record, which apparently it wasn't, because it's available in this book. So there you go, women's rights freaks who think that women are still so imperiled and oppressed even in 2018 that they can tattoo "fuck Trump" on the inside of their lips with no reprisal, and yet they're still so oppressed. But there you go. There's the Chairman Mao that we all came to love at the end of his life. And this man, I don't know if there are enough acres in hell for him to be rolled through, on one of his impossible to push iron carts. But I feel sure that this kind of barbarism, this kind of savagery is being punished for eternity now. So Chairman Mao, wherever you are, I dedicate this show to whatever punishment you are living out for eternity. This book is proof enough to me that China was nowhere near ready to join the international community. And if this kind of shit is still going on there behind that bamboo curtain, then they should still not be a part of the international community. So go read Mao's Great Famine by Frank Decoder. Yeah, I suck with pronunciations, guys. It is what it is. All right, that's it for this show. Thank you for listening. I hope it held some meaning to you. Thank you to Stewart Swerdlow for being my esteemed guest for an hour and a half. And I'm not sure what next week's episode holds yet, but I can promise you it will be as memorable as this one was. Thanks again, guys.
Subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through their advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible.
You're all fucking autistic.